Greetings, welcome to the channel. I'm going to be talking about Crusader No Remorse, another game from my childhood. Kind of. While I started with the sequel first as a kid, it wasn't until recently I managed to finish the PC version from GOG. The game plays in an isometric viewpoint and is filled with tons of action and gore, as well as a killer soundtrack. Every kid's dream game, am I right? Anyways, without further ado, let's put on our silencer helmet and take on the World Economic Consortium with no remorse. The beginning of the game has you taking on the role of a silencer, an elite soldier of the WEC. In the intro, your team is wiped out by a WEC mech for refusing orders to fire on civilians, leaving you, the captain, the sole survivor. Out of allies, the captain joins the resistance and begins his personal vendetta against the WEC. And that's it. That's basically the plot of the game right there. During the silencer's crusade, he undergoes 15 action-packed missions, some of them involving blowing up facilities, rescuing certain people, etc. Pretty standard stuff. And the game does take a break in between missions where you return to base to heal up, charge your batteries, and purchase weapons and ammo before getting briefed on your next mission. You can also talk to your fellow resistance soldiers who outright distrust you in the beginning, but do warm up to you later. All in all, the story is pretty simple, and a good excuse for the gameplay that comes later. And yes, the silencer looks like a certain Star Wars character, doesn't he? The game is full of references, such as this Ed 209 looking mech from RoboCop. The game also has references, though, to other games within Origin EA, such as General Maxis being a nod to Maxis Studios, creators of SimCity and The Sims, and the game's documents having a piece about Project Shodan from System Shock. Origin liked putting references in their games. For example, in No Remorse, you meet a character named Senator Snell, better known as Dallas Snell, executive producer to many Origin games of the time. He also showed up as a self-insert NPC in Ultima 7 The Black Gate with the name DeSnell, along with many other self-inserted NPCs of the developers, the most famous being Richard Garriott, better known as Lord British. Alright, moving on now, you're given a few options for difficulties once you start a new game. You can choose Mama's Boy. Yeah, back then the devs loved poking fun at players who play on easy mode. Weekend Warrior, Loose Cannon, and No Remorse. Mama's Boy is obviously the easiest difficulty and probably not the one most people are going to choose. Weekend Warrior is normal, of course, and Loose Cannon and No Remorse are the harder difficulties, with ammo much more difficult to come by, and more enemy types appearing even in the early missions. No Remorse is absurdly difficult, with even the basic enemies having advanced weapons like lasers. One rocket will kill you in one hit even with full shields and health. I do not recommend it for your first playthrough. Before you start a new game though, it'd be a good idea to look through the manual. The game has no tutorial, so if you haven't looked through the manual, you're going to be pretty lost. Barring that though, a quick press of the F1 key will bring up the controls so you can practice until you get comfortable. Anyways, if you played games like old school Resident Evil and Silent Hill, then Crusader is a bit similar. You basically use tank controls, controlling the silencer with the arrow keys. Holding shift lets you run, holding alt lets you sidestep, move forwards and backwards, and holding control lets you roll from side to side, and J lets you jump. Anyways, the controls take some getting used to, especially for modern day gamers, but even as someone who grew up with these games, they can be pretty frustrating. There are times in the game where it's easy to get stuck on objects and having to stand in a certain spot just to access a terminal. Unfortunately, the control scheme hasn't really aged well at all. But once you get used to the archaic control system, you're ready to lay waste to the WEC with various weapons of your choosing. You can only carry 5 weapons at a time, which sounds small, but... Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention earlier that there are no hotkeys to switch to different weapons. Instead, you cycle through your weapons with the Q and W keys. And since it's a game from 1995, unsurprisingly, there is no sort of weapon sorting system or anything. So be glad for the 5 weapon limit, because having to cycle through more than 5 weapons would be a nightmare, especially when you got soldiers and mechs raining unholy hell on the silencer. As far as weapons go though, you get your choice of pistols, shotguns, both pump action and auto, energy weapons which deplete your energy of course, and rocket launchers. I personally rarely use the energy weapons, as you're not able to loot corpses if they blow up or get vaporized. And speaking of corpses, this game is very gory, for its time at least, and well actually it's probably gory today. Enemies can die in pretty gruesome ways, such as being set on fire, getting vaporized into nothing, falling into radioactive waste, I guess that is, and that goes for you as well. The combat in this game feels good, and most of the set pieces and levels are destructible. There are many ways to take out enemies and turrets, and you're given many tools at your disposal to do so. Don't want to expose yourself to that turret? Use a spider bomb. Don't feel like looking for a key card for a locked door? Just blow it up with a detonation pack. Warning though, it'll set off an alarm, so be careful. Aside from enemy soldiers though, you'll encounter civilian workers during your missions, and you're free to kill them if you're feeling bloodthirsty. And you may as well, as some of these workers will set off an alarm if they're near a panel, and there were times in the game where it seemed like some of the civilians were following me, got in the way, or just flat out annoyed me, like this guy right here. Security Cartel Auxiliary Command Terminal. Force Field Control System. Field will remain intact unless auxiliary code is not re-entered via primary command terminal. Okay. Stop that. Seriously, the civilians are annoying sometimes. So yeah, you can kill them if you want to, however, for this playthrough, I was playing the Silencer as mostly a good guy, just like when I was a kid, so usually I left them alone, unless they cried out for guards, set off an alarm panel, or simply just got in my way. And I can't say for sure, but my thinking is that Origin put unarmed people in the game as a way of testing the player's morality, which will make sense considering that Origin Systems developed the Ultima games, but if you're hoping to just kill enemy soldiers and leave the civilians alone, it's not possible, unfortunately, at least with that one example earlier. If you do decide to go full murder hobo though, be sure to loot the civilians' bodies, as they do carry a bit of credits you'll need to purchase weapons and ammo back at base, and yeah, that reminds me, I can't not mention Weasel, the game's merchant who is quite the character.
Come. Hello. Weasel's the name. Selling weapons is my game. The finest of consortium plunder brought to you at low prices. Hey, I do it for free, but a man's got to pay his people, you know. Also, I got to take care of my little baby. Baby. This stuff isn't exactly easy to come by either, if you know what I mean. So tell me, Captain, what can I do for you today? Huh?
Definitely a memorable NPC. But onto the graphics, which still hold up even today, I think. Crusader boasted a resolution of 640 by 480 with SVGA graphics at the time, with cutting-edge FMVs. I say cutting, more like cheesy. They were a product of their time for sure, but honestly, the acting in the FMVs though really isn't that bad compared to other video games of the decade. While it's not going to win any Oscars, the acting is passable. It's not great, but it's not bad either. Each character fits the world, and the whole atmosphere of the FMVs reminded me of B-movies of the 80s, which would make sense given some of the references this game throws out. And at the time I was a console gamer, so coming from the Sega Genesis, it blew my mind at the time that we were getting full motion video cutscenes with voice acting. And yeah, while you're probably thinking, what's the big deal? Games back then were finally getting some voice acting with video when the PS1 came around, and much earlier actually with Ultima 7 and 8 for the PC. Now I'm not going to leave out talking about the music, but one thing I do have to say about it is that it's awesome. And I know music is pretty subjective, but if you like what we've been hearing in the video, then the rest of the soundtrack is pretty darn good, and it is worth a listen to. It's pretty easy to find if you do a web search, and I'm not going to leave a link in the description because I don't know if that's allowed, but yeah, anyways, not a whole lot to say about the music itself, except that it was composed by a man named Andrew Sega. Yeah, Sega, like Sega Genesis. Not only did he compose music for Crusader, but he also worked on Wing Commander, Unreal, and Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am for the PS2? Huh. Interesting. But anyways, if you like what you hear, you'll be happy to know that the sequel has great music as well. Now for the end of the video. Do I recommend playing Crusader No Remorse, even for modern gamers? The answer is a big yes, if you can get past the keyboard control scheme. Like I said earlier, the controls take a little getting used to, and they can be pretty frustrating at times, but I do think the game is worth playing, even today. You can easily get it on GOG, and if you wait for a sale, I believe it goes down to 99 cents or something like that. Just be sure to read the manual before playing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to go play Crusader No Regret. The Silencer still has work to do.
Rest assured, Silencer, I shall not forget about you. The world is a small place to hide.